Hello, hello. Welcome to the Worthy Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten McNeill, a Canadian self-published author and full-service editor for fellow writers. On this podcast, you'll get a look into my personal writing journey and find encouragement to enjoy your own. If you had a good time with me, I would appreciate if you could like, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. All right, worthy writers, let's jump in. Episode number 3, My Childhood Writings. Just like the title suggests, I'll be sharing my best memories of the stories I wrote when I was a kid, ending off with a few fun writing quotes and encouragement to look into your own past writing. My earliest memory of trying to write a story comes from the 2nd grade. I have such a clear memory of one moment that I'm not even sure it's real anymore. Do you ever get that? There's this image in your head that reminds you of something from your childhood, but you don't know if it's just something your brain warped together to create that association. In 2nd grade, I'm sitting at my desk with a pen. Could have been a pencil. Did anyone else have a secret hatred for pencil because it smudged all over your hand? More so if you were left-handed. And what about those notebooks your parents had to buy at the beginning of the school year? They tell you to buy a bunch, but did you even make use of all the pages? Wow, I'm the queen of getting sidetracked today, huh? So, scene. Girl sitting at a desk, pencil in hand. On the top of the page, she starts writing a story about pirates and hidden treasure. You may remember me mentioning the book Pirates Past Noon by Mary Pope Osborne, which inspired me to write the story. I wish I knew where that story was so I could share some of it with you. But you'll just have to pretend you know how my 7-year-old brain thought. I might have written a few pages, but I can tell you it never became a finished story. Thus began the writer habit of starting a story and never finishing, most likely to focus on another creative project. It's not much, but that's what I remember as the moment that ignited the beginning of my writing career. Pirates. That was my defining moment. I definitely need to write a pirate novel. Anyone got any ideas that's different from the ones in the Caribbean? In that same grade, I did write a full-length story. Okay, it wasn't a novel's worth, but it was a complete story. A page and a half, maybe 2, about a snarky cat and a happy-go-lucky dog who travel the world together. Original, hey? Funny enough, I got the idea for the characters from one of my favorite chapter books called Bunnicula. You heard me right. A bunny Dracula, sucking the juices out of vegetables and turning them completely white. The family finds the rabbit outside of the movie theater where Dracula is playing, so that's where the name comes from. Who doesn't love a good pet bun? The cat in the story, Chester, is suspicious right away. He doesn't trust this new pet. The dog, Harold, loves the bunny, but Chester is insistent on proving Bunnicula to be evil and starts finding tiny bite marks in the white vegetables. Just for fun, I looked up a couple quotes from this book. Since the book is told from the perspective of the dog, I thought it'd be funny to share these. So, this is a rabbit, I thought. He sort of looks like Chester, only he's got longer ears and a shorter tail, and a motor in his nose. Perfect way to describe a bunny in a kid's novel, right? Then another is a rabbit, I concluded. Is cute to look at, but is generally useless, especially as a companion to dogs. I could see that second quote being said by the cat because of the useless comment, but it's cute nonetheless. The authors of this book series, meant for kids, I promise you, are Deborah and James Howe. Oh my god, those are my parents' names. Are you secretly authors? Did you write those books under the pen name Howe? Doubtful, since I just looked it up and the woman unfortunately died before the books were published in the years 1979 and 1980. Wow, those books were old. Did my school not update its library? Don't care, still loved it. Inspired my first 2 animal characters as a writer. Still suspicious that my parents are secretly writers, but moving onward and upward we shall. Fast forward to the 3rd grade. We're tasked with an assignment to write a short story with a time limit, no less. How dare you give a writer a time limit? Talk about pressure. I didn't finish the story, but I was still asked to share it. I'm thinking it was around St. Patrick's Day, because my story had a leprechaun in it, so I wrote about this kid who goes into the forest. Another side thought, a lot of my early stories took place in the forest. My favorite book series, Magic Tree House, took place in the forest when they're in modern day. And my story about a dog and cat had them traveling in the forest. Now we're in the forest with a magical leprechaun. Are you getting tired of the word forest? Anyway, so this kid and this leprechaun are in a forest, and somehow they get locked in the secret tunnel. Creepy. No idea if this leprechaun lured the kid down there in promise of gold, but I don't trust him. I'm assuming I made him a good guy. Don't worry, my tendencies to write darker stories didn't develop until my later years. As I read my story to the 3rd grade class about this pot of gold the characters are trying to find, I stopped mid-sentence. I didn't get to finish. I still had ideas for the story. When everyone kept looking at me, I was nervous. What did they want? That was all I had. Then the realization hit me. They were waiting for me to finish reading the story because they were so excited to know what happened. Can you imagine the ego boost that gave me? I created something that people enjoyed. They wanted to know more about it. Even if I didn't know then I wanted to be a writer, the seed of encouragement had definitely been planted. My teacher encouraged me to read more, but when I told her I didn't have anything, she asked how I would finish it. I explained that the characters found a golden key in the tunnel and were able to escape and find the treasure. She seemed happy that I had the idea to finish it off. I remember this teacher's name, but I won't repeat it on here. She was a strict teacher, but I have to say she was probably my favorite ever. There are memories I have of her teaching the class how to read, write, and pronounce specific words. When she wanted us to remember how to spell there, T-H-E-I-R, she would stomp her foot on the E to help us remember that it comes before the I, right in the middle of the word. T-H-E-I-R. She repeated that multiple times while stomping her foot to get it into our heads. She was so good at giving us memory tricks and helping us emphasize the words in a special way. That, combined with her encouragement and the Robert Munch plays we put on with her, which I discussed in episode 1, makes her my favorite teacher. The teacher that gave me the mindset to remind me of my potential. There's also a story she told that I think is good advice for everyone. Before she had us as a class, there was a student she had that was quite disruptive. One day, during a class discussion, she called on a student that was shy and quiet. That student answered the question, only to have the disruptive student laugh and point at them, thinking they had given the wrong answer and were stupid. The teacher explained that the shy student had given the right answer. The lesson here is to speak up. Whether you know you're wrong or not, if you're willing to learn from the experience, speak up. Share your story, write your novel, speak up. Next, we moved to grade 4. It was Halloween, and we were tasked with writing a themed story. I have to say that I was always the type to write more pages than required for an assignment. My story was about a girl who went through a haunted house with all these dangerous traps and gross creatures. I think we had to illustrate the story too. I am not an artist. I'll leave it at that. My character ends up falling into a pit of snakes. My plot twist in the story is that she's writing her spooky tale in her diary while sitting in this pit of snakes. Wait a minute, did I say plot twist? I meant plot hole. She's writing her story in a snake pit. How is she still alive? Why did she bring her diary to a haunted house? Who's reading the story? Does she expect to be found? Where are her parents? Is anyone else in this house? Oh well, hindsight is 20/20, right? Moving on to 6th grade. This is the year. The one when I knew who I was meant to be. Remember earlier how I talked about those memories that feel vivid but may or may not be real? Well, here's another one. I'm sitting in my parents' van with my head against the window. It's a sunny day, no memory of where we're going or what I'm thinking, but suddenly it hits me. I am going to become a writer. It bugged me a bit in class because my teacher in that grade always said this other student would make an excellent writer one day. I was jealous. I wanted that validation. I craved the same type of encouragement my 3rd grade teacher gave me. Never got it. If I could go back and talk to my young self, I would tell her that you don't need validation from others to call yourself a writer. You have worth. and value, and you are a beautifully creative person. One teacher's opinion shouldn't matter when there's so many other readers out there. A story I wrote in the 6th grade wasn't one for school. It was for my dad. I bet he still has it somewhere. It was either a birthday or Father's Day gift, but it was definitely a special occasion. In this story, my dad enters a raffle to win a Corvette. That's his favorite vehicle. He doesn't win the raffle, but me and my siblings in the story trick him into thinking he won. When he goes to look in the driveway, there's only a toy Corvette on the pavement. He's disappointed, but we still show him love. Luckily, he owns a Corvette now, so I don't feel as bad writing that story of dark comedy gold. I think my family's love for sarcasm and teasing each other really rooted into my writing process. He loved the story regardless, and the adults that read it were really impressed by my grammar and enjoyed the piece. That made me feel really good. The story was just a gift from my dad, but it reinforced the idea that I can be a writer. The last couple pieces I want to talk about were created in grade 7. The assignment, writing a kid's book. More illustrating. Really? I am a writer. I can't do both. I'm talented, but never with art. In grade 7, we were buddies to a kindergarten class, which just meant we hung out with them for a bit once a week. One of the things we did for them was write and draw a book, which we read to them on their next visit. To gain inspiration for this book, we went to the library at school to pick out a couple. The one I picked out was Love You Forever by Robert Munsch. Aha, so he did inspire my writing after all. In this book, there was this repeated verse throughout about how much this baby was loved. For some reason, the librarian told me I had to create a similar melodic verse in my book since I was using it for inspiration. I probably didn't have to, but I ran with it. My story was about a bear and his mother. There was some kind of conflict between them, but no matter what happened, she always sang him this beautiful lullaby. By the end of the book, the bear was supposed to learn some important lesson. In the first draft of my book, the bear receives a big spanking from his mom before his behavior is corrected. My teacher didn't like the violence aspect, understandably so. He was okay with bribing him with a chocolate bar, however, but positive reinforcement is always better, I guess. When I read it to the girl I was buddied with, she seemed to enjoy it. I honestly have very vague memories of grade 7. Long story short, that was how my first children's book came to be. At the end of the year, we had an assignment to write an extra chapter for a book we had to read as a class. It was The Breadwinner by Deborah Ellis. Another Deborah? Suspicious. If you don't know the book, I'd probably still recommend it, even though I haven't read it since grade 7. It's about a young Afghani girl who pretends to be a boy to provide for her family. Her father was arrested by the Taliban, so the responsibility fell on her. Funnily enough, I had read the book on my own time the previous year, so reading it then was a breeze. Since it was too close to the end of the school year, my teacher didn't have time to grade these chapters. Of course, I finished the assignment. No memory of what was in the chapter, but I think I deserve an honorable mention for completing the work. With that, you've heard all the most notable stories I wrote up to the age 12. In high school, I wrote a novel, but we'll get to that another time. As we wrap up this episode, I'd like to leave you with a few quotes. Madeleine L'Engle said, "You have to write the book that wants to be written, and if the book will be too difficult for grown-ups, then you write it for children." Children are so much more open and imaginative, aren't they? There's this innocence that most adults lose because of their experiences and how they're told to grow up. Have you read A Wrinkle in Time by this author? It's a beautiful book that is so relevant still because of its themes of love, good and evil power struggles, and the power of individuality. Great lessons for children to learn. John Jakes said, "Be yourself. Above all, let who you are, what you believe, shine through every sentence you write, every piece you finish." So true. All you need to focus on is writing what you believe in and never changing yourself to fit in some box of what a quote-unquote real writer is supposed to be. Anne Lamott said, "Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere." This quote also reminds me of one similar about how a writer's debut novel is not their first book written. Does anyone know who said that? I can't remember the exact wording. This whole episode is about my first drafts and how terrible they were. But they all had potential. I've been writing since I was 7, always learning, growing, finding my voice. We all start at the bottom and work until we achieve our goals. I challenge you to look back at one of your old writing pieces. Think about how much you've grown since then. What would you tell the self that wrote that old piece based on the present you and your experiences? Create a journal entry or simply ponder the journey that brought you to today. After that, make sure you head to my Buy Me a Coffee profile to check out the bonus content revolving around this week's episode. If you're a Worthy Writers subscriber, you'll have access to behind-the-scenes content like phone wallpaper graphics and bloopers. In next week's episode, I'll explore another myth: real writers find writing easy. The following week, I'll share my experiences writing my very first novel in high school. Thank you for listening. Happy writing, Worthy Writers! Thank you for listening to the Worthy Writers podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Share your love and support by checking out my Buy Me a Coffee profile for bonus content and to help me continue building my creative empire. If you'd like other ways to connect, follow me on Instagram, join my Facebook group, or explore my website to learn more about me, be part of my community, or suggest topics for future episodes. All links are in the show notes. I can't wait to connect with you. My final words before you go: never forget that you are worthy.